Badlands of Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Geopolitics with Ghost. I think, so anyway, kind of a crazy day. Full disclosure, I think just personal stuff going on. Rather than cancel the show, I need to go grab my daughter at like 2:15 off of the bus and then get her home and get her set up like in her room with an activity. But I have like a 9-minute video of Israeli journalist Barak Ravid from 2021 talking about his conversation with Donald Trump on Israeli media. Very enlightening conversation. I've never really found a good time to play it before, but I think what I'll do is I'm going to leave that playing while I go get her off the bus. So that'll be in like 10 minutes, like 5 or 10 minutes. I'm going to do that. I don't think I'm muted, so we're good. But yeah, so if people show up and they're wondering what's going on, just let them know that I'll be back. If for any reason I'm not back in time after the clip finishes playing, just sit tight and we'll be good. Anyway, before we go there, I wanted to say thank you to a new sponsor. You can see them at the bottom of the screen, Applied Awareness. I want to start by playing their ad that's pre-produced.
Hello, Badlanders! It's your friendly neighborhood Jordan here, and I've talked to so many of you guys at the GARTs who've wanted help with supplementation, diet, exercise programming, and more. So I'm excited to announce the launch of my Applied Awareness private coaching group. In this group, I condense 15 years of holistic health experience into training just for you, with one-on-one support from me by way of weekly Zoom calls, daily video updates, a community chat where we can all ask and answer questions from each other, plus a lot of video courses, 8 courses in there with over 70 videos at this point. And if you like the whiteboard education, there's plenty of that in there. So if you're looking to move better, feel better, lose weight or gain weight, and strengthen your mind and your body, this is for you. This weekend, I'm launching a 6-week self-development program. So check the description down below to learn more and find how to sign up. I hope to see you in there.
All right, our friend Jordan Sather. Yes, so Applied Awareness, you can go to school.com. That's SKOOL.com/applied awareness. And thanks to Jordan for sponsoring today's show. Okay, yeah, and I saw people making comments about the intro music. The intro music it's the theme song from Casino Royale. I think it's the 2006, maybe 2005. Bond film with Daniel Craig, written, produced by Chris Cornell, who some of you Gen X folks might remember is the lead singer from Soundgarden, I believe. I think I have that right. Soundgarden, yeah. And Cornell, him, and I think it was the guy from Linkin Park, whose name escapes me, who looks like he is the son of what's his name, Podesta. And maybe even like Avicii, the DJ. I think they were all working together on like a child trafficking documentary. And all of them mysteriously died. So Cornell seems like he's a pretty base dude. It's a great song. That film, I was raised on Bond films, for those who don't know, but like my dad was always too cheap to buy them, so he'd tape them when they came on television on VHS tapes, and we had a box of VHS tapes. So whenever you watch the Bond film, not only were you watching like the edited for TV version, but it had commercials as well. So yeah, anyway, but so I was raised on Bond films, which is funny, like doing what I'm doing now, understanding it was all a giant psyop to get us to think that the intelligence agencies were cool. Although that one in 2006 I thought was definitely the best of all of them. Holds up pretty well. Best Bond villain, best Bond girl, best music, best style production, storyboard, writing, all of it, and story arc. So anyway, yeah, I didn't think I was going to get very far. Like, I didn't want to start like with a news story and then have to stop halfway through, because I am going to have to walk out the door here in a minute or two to grab my daughter. So I will get this video. It's 9 minutes long, queued up here in a second. And I saw Rookie Irish in the chat said if the video does not cover my time away, he's going to entertain everybody. Appreciate that, Rookie. Praying for your dad, by the way, and your family. Hope everything is okay. Chester Bennington, by the way, he's the guy from Lincoln Park, correct? So, it seems like there are a lot of people who are in the zeitgeist. I don't know if I call these people celebrities, but they certainly are famous people. I think a celebrity, I kind of save that for the curated people who are at the very top of the pyramid, who are actually put in your face to manipulate you and give you opinions. Yeah. So yeah, Lukester 777 asked that was Daniel Craig's first film. Yeah, that was the first one he was in. Did Zach Payne? I see a trope man says Zach Payne did a baseless conspiracy. They did that on Chester Bennington. Yeah, Chris, Chester, and Anthony Bourdain. The three of them were working together. Misfit, is that right? Bay Theater Dave says, "Too bad Daniel Craig is such a libtard." Is he? I don't even know what his politics are. That's hilarious if he is. Doesn't surprise me. They always are, aren't they? Yeah, Soundgarden and Audio Slave. So he was the lead singer of Audio Slave too. I remember them. All right, cool. So I'm going to go ahead and get this video playing. I'll see y'all in like 10 minutes, basically. Yeah, so catch you on a minute.
Donald Trump is very angry at Israel in the context of Iran's Qasem Soleimani's assassination, but he wouldn't say why. This is part of an interview with Israeli journalist Barak Ravid, who has just published his book, Trump's Peace, focusing on the Abraham Accords. Good evening, Barak.
Hi, Yaakov.
First, you know what? Let's take a listen. What did Trump tell you about Soleimani's assassination? Take a listen. Coming up. All right, here we have it. One second, and we'll have it.
I was very disappointed in Israel having to do with that event.
What do you mean?
I can't mention that now, but I was not happy with Israel.
During the killing of Soleiman?
Israel did not do the right thing. People will be hearing about that at the right time.
All right. So, Barak, any clue as to what he meant?
Yes. When I had this interview with former President Trump, it was our second interview. It was in a phone call in July. And I was really surprised that he said that, because I had no clue that there was any problem around the killing of Soleimani, because I think, and I'm sure you would agree, that in real time, it looked like the height of the Israeli-U.S. cooperation against Iran. But apparently, behind the scenes, in places that the general public and us journalists did not see, there was quite a big crisis. And at the beginning, when I started asking former Trump's staffers about this, I got the same answer, no comment, because I got the sense that there was something that they felt really uneasy about this event. And eventually I managed to find out what happened, at least in Trump's view. Apparently, Israel was involved in the killing of Soleimani, obviously, and Israeli officials confirmed that they contributed in intelligence on the whereabouts of Soleimani. But apparently Trump wanted Israel to have much more active role and that basically, if I can sum it up, that Israel will kill Soleimani, especially after there was this intelligence that allegedly said that Soleimani was planning attacks against American targets in the region. And at least what Trump understood at the time was that Netanyahu didn't want to do it and didn't want to that Israel will kill Soleimani. And Trump got upset, and he told his aides that Netanyahu was ready to fight Iran until the last American soldier, which is quite a statement by the U.S. president. And since that moment, I think that incident contributed a lot to the fallout between those two leaders in the last year of Trump in the Oval Office.
Yeah, maybe we'll talk about this later also. But according to your interviews and various accounts, this peace accord, the Abraham Accord, was actually one breath away from not happening at all.
Exactly. They started negotiating the Abraham Accords on July 2nd, after it was clear to Netanyahu that his annexation fantasies in the West Bank are blocked by the Trump administration. And then the UAE came with this idea of, instead of annexing parts of the West Bank, let's normalize relations. And they started negotiating, and on July 26th, basically they had a deal. And they needed another 2 weeks for logistics and consultations in each country. And then they set a date for the call between the three leaders, between Trump, Netanyahu, and Mohammed bin Zayed. They set it for August 13th, 2020. And then on August 12th, 24 hours before, when everything is set and ready, the Israeli ambassador in Washington, Ron Dermer, calls the White House. And he tells Avi Berkowitz, the White House envoy to the Middle East, that Netanyahu doesn't want to sign the deal. And he tells them, listen, there's this domestic political issue in Israel. The budget is not going to pass. Netanyahu decided to go for elections. Therefore, he's not going to do it. Partially, and Dermer didn't say it, but the reason was that if there are elections, Netanyahu cannot give up on the annexation. That was his main bargaining chip in his election campaign, for one election campaign after the other. And when the White House hears this, they basically freak out and they get angry. And the U.S. ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, who at the time was already in the White House waiting for the announcement, calls the prime minister's office in Jerusalem and shouts at Netanyahu's people. And he tells them, listen, this is happening tomorrow. You have no choice. You can't go back. And then he calls Dermer and tells him, Ron, tomorrow, 12 p.m. Washington time, be on the phone line because this phone call is happening. You can't go back. That's it. And then Netanyahu understands after a few hours that he has to do it and he can't backtrack. But for several hours, it looked like Netanyahu is about to pull the plug on the whole deal.
Yeah, what a drama. Now let's talk about the other side, the Emiratis. What drove them to push ahead, to go ahead? It wasn't easy for them, but they did it anyway.
Yeah, and I think that maybe the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi, Mohammed bin Zayed, is the unsung hero of the Abraham Accords. That's at least my conclusion. Because basically when we got to the end of June 2020, the U.S. and Israel were on a collision course because Netanyahu wanted annexation, the White House didn't want annexation, and they didn't know how to get out of this. And basically Mohammed bin Zayed, who wanted to normalize relations with Israel for a long time, was just looking for the right timing. He also didn't want annexation because this would kill the two-state solution and would make normalization with Israel impossible and therefore would harm the UAE's interests. He decided to bring this ladder in the form of a normalization agreement with Israel in order to take both Trump and Netanyahu off the tree and turn this huge international crisis into a historic breakthrough.
Right. And there's also, of course, the peace process with the Palestinians, so-called the deal of the century, which Trump wanted very much, But now, speaking to you, he blames Netanyahu for not willing to go ahead. Is that possible?
Yes. I think that, and I asked Trump, if that's what you think, if you think that the Palestinian President Abbas was more forthcoming than Netanyahu, why did you give all those presents to Netanyahu and gave the stick to Abbas? And he said that in retrospect, he was told by his staff and for a very long time that the Israelis are the ones who want peace and that the Palestinians are the obstructionists and rejectionists. And while he was in office, he realized that it wasn't the case, and that basically Netanyahu didn't really want a deal. And when Trump introduced his deal of the century in January 2020, he was launching it then because he was getting ready for a possible second term, and he wanted to start laying the ground and mobilize international support for his deal. And when Netanyahu came to the White House and started talking about annexation at the ceremony, Trump suddenly realized that for Netanyahu, he didn't care about any peace deal. He just wanted to go for a land grab in the West Bank. And as Trump told me, he got angry and he stopped it.
Yeah, he got angry many times during your interview.
Exactly.
Barak Ravid, thank you very much. Good luck with the new book.
Thank you, Yaakov.
See you again.
All right, we're back. So, how was the video? Did y'all enjoy it? Insightful, right? So that guy, I saw people in the chat saying that, yes, that is Barak Ravid. That is the guy who I do cite him pretty often. And he is, he's kind of like Trump's like go-to Israeli journalist. Hold on one second. Trying to get better lighting in here. There we go. It's much better lighting. Yeah, he's like Trump's go-to Israeli journalist. So that interview was from December of 2021. He interviewed Trump in a phone interview, and he wrote a book about it. All of those like little clips you've seen me play, like the 1-minute clips of Trump talking about Abbas, talking about Netanyahu, talking about Benny Gantz. Those are all from that recorded interview. And so that was then him going on Israeli media and doing an interview about his interview with Donald Trump. And he gives a lot of little tidbits that I've never heard the raw footage of Trump telling him this stuff. He kind of put out a few of those 1-minute clips of Trump talking about Abbas or Trump talking about Netanyahu. But some of those other other moments are pretty insightful, like him backing out. That's where I think we learned about him backing out of Soleimani, which Trump later confirmed. He talked about that during I think it was either a campaign speech or it was just one of those rallies that he did in 2023 where he talked about I'll never forgive Bibi for doing that. He backed out the night before. And what happened was David Barnea, who's now the Mossad director, at the time, he was just a top-ranking agent in Mossad, and he was appointed to the Soleimani file, meaning he was like the point man on the Soleimani stuff. My personal theory is that he was Netanyahu. I mean, he was Soleimani's handler, meaning Soleimani was working for Mossad. And it was Barnea who picked up the phone and called the White House the night before the attack, which was supposed to be led by the IDF. Israel was supposed to take the point in killing him. And then Barnea calls up and was like, yeah, we're out. Like the prime minister can't whatever. He gave some BS excuse. It was like Bibi can't afford like the political optics of this right now, which doesn't make any sense now in hindsight. Like, what are you talking about? That would have been a great political talking point. Yeah, so that's pretty interesting. Barnea now is the director of Mossad. He had to become director in 2022 when Yossi Cohen was revealed to be sneaking around Africa and was banned from the DRC because he was trying to plan a coup against President Shisekedi. So, that is certainly interesting. And then you get the other little tidbit is right before the Abraham Accords. And all this is happening within the same year. The Soleimani strike was January 2020. The Abraham Accords was ultimately September of 2020, like 2 months before the election. That's when the Abraham Accords are formally signed. But the month before the Abraham Accords, just for those who weren't following the timeline, they have this call, like the middle of August, there's a call that's planned where like all the parties are going to be on this conference call. And that's where they're going to finalize everything. And like, basically like we're going to agree to everything in principle. And that's where the actual agreement happens. And then a month later, they're going to have a formal, like the pomp and circumstance, like the formal setting where they get in front of the cameras and they sign the pieces of paper, but they got to get the agreement like hammered out. And they had all these calls over the course of however long it was. And then this was the final call to like finalize everything. And the day before the call, Ron Dermer, Netanyahu's right-hand man, picks up the phone and calls the White House and says, we have an election coming up. We can't afford the optics of this. This is just too much for us. So we're going to back out. Like, we're not going to do this. And that was where Trump picks up the phone and calls Netanyahu directly. And he's like, you better get your ass on that phone call tomorrow. If you're not there, like, be on the phone or else. And Netanyahu was basically like, yes, sir. And he showed up and pretty much like against his will signs the Abraham Accords, which again, the Abraham Accords were marketed to us as agreements designed to protect Israel from Arab aggression. That was the whole like presentation to us. Now, back in December of 2022, I was doing a podcast with somebody else. I was the co-host on somebody's podcast, and the first time I ever talked about this, like the Middle East, my speculation was that the Abraham Accords was actually designed like in practice to protect the Arabs from Israeli aggression. That's actually what it was for. And I think in hindsight, that actually ends up to be the case. But I think if I wasn't listening to the clip, I was helping my daughter, but if I remember the clip correctly, Ravid also talks about how earlier in the summer in 2020, Netanyahu was trying to back out, or he was signaling that he didn't want to do the Abraham Accords, to the extent that the ambassador from the UAE to America, who is a guy's name, his name is Youssef Al-Otaiba. Youssef Al-Otaiba, and I have another interesting story about him, but we'll do maybe a Book of Trump episode on him. He writes a op-ed. Like I think it's the first time this has ever happened. He writes an op-ed that's published in Israeli media. It's like an open letter to the Israeli people, and he basically, and here's what it was. It wasn't about the Abraham Accords. It was about the plans to annex the West Bank, the very thing that we're facing right now. Okay, and this is going to bring us into our first story. I'm tying all this together. He says, hey, Netanyahu is planning. Remember, this is 2020. So this is before Netanyahu teams up with the zealots. This is when he still has, the quote unquote moderates with him, or at least some of the moderates with him. It's before he brings in Itamar Ben-Gvir, before he brings in Bezalel Smotrich. And they are devising plans to annex the West Bank. And Youssef Al-Otaiba, who is the UAE ambassador to the U.S., he lives in D.C. and basically like knows everyone. He was called in 2012 the most charming and well-liked diplomat in D.C. By the Huffington Post or whatever. I have that article. He puts out a letter to the Israeli people and he says, look, guys, if Netanyahu does this, if Netanyahu annexes the West Bank, there is no Abraham Accords. Like we're not doing the Abraham Accords if y'all are going to take over Palestine. Y'all need to let Netanyahu know, like you, the Israeli people, that this is not acceptable. He was basically pleading directly with the Israeli people, saying, we want peace. We, the Arabs, want peace. But if we're going to have peace, y'all need to come meet us halfway and not go after these Palestinian people and not take their homes, not take their land, like meet us halfway here. And so that seemed to be enough, at least between that and the pressure from Trump. That was enough to get Netanyahu to back off the West Bank annexation, get him to the table to sign the Abraham Accords, which of course Netanyahu is now touting as like this major accomplishment that he spearheaded. And he's like, well, I'm the one who, under President Trump's leadership, like I did the Abraham Accords. The Abraham Accords happened in spite of Netanyahu. And again, like I was speculating back then in 2022 that the Israelis did not want the Abraham Accords to happen. They were forced upon the Israelis. And now I think you're seeing that's the case, because what the Abraham Accords represent is peace. It's basically freezing the lines, right? And saying no more annexation, no more taking of Palestine. Like it's over. Like we're done. Okay. And that's not going to fly for Netanyahu. So let's start there for our storylines. For those wondering, I see people asking in the chat. I hosted a replay this morning of Netanyahu's speech. If you're interested in his address to the UN, he did speak to the UN this morning. I'm not going to talk about the speech on this show because I spent like an hour doing a debrief on it. That's on the Badlands Rumble page. Go listen to it there. I did that so we could focus on geopolitics in this show. There's just so much to cover, and I knew I'd spend the whole time talking about that speech. So hope that makes sense. Here is our first story. Right here. Sorry, I picked the wrong one. Okay, so I think we may have covered this before, but this now is going to come back in like full circle now that we've heard Netanyahu's speech this morning, and we have a clip from Trump that we're going to play here in a second. This is from September 11th, so this is the day after Charlie Kirk is assassinated, which is why this went totally under the radar. This is why I think the timeline is very sketchy to me. The timeline with and I haven't added it to the screen. I see the timeline is very sketchy to me. It's a very sketchy timeline because Qatar is bombed by Israel on September 9th. Charlie Kirk is killed on September 10th. And then on September 11th, Netanyahu signs this E1 settlement expansion package. He declares in a public ceremony where he signs this, he says, this place belongs to us, talking about the West Bank, not Gaza, the West Bank. Palestine, like the main part of Palestine. And he says there will be no Palestinian state. Okay. And he says, quote, we are going to fulfill our promise that there will be no Palestinian state. This place belongs to us. We will safeguard our heritage, our land, and our security. We are going to double the city's population. He said that the project is about realizing a vision. Something very big is happening here. And of course, he's talking about the Greater Israel Project, which ties into revisionist Zionism, which was I explained on the debrief earlier, an idea that was conceptualized and introduced by Ze'ev Jabotinsky in the 1920s, 1930s. And Ze'ev Jabotinsky was the leader of the main Jewish terrorist group, the Irgun, in British Mandate Palestine. And his personal secretary is none other than Benjamin Netanyahu, Netanyahu's father. So Netanyahu grew up knowing all these people. Like he was influenced by these people as a child. And that explains his worldview. And so the E1 project, it says, quote, it says not quote, but the article says last month, the E1 project, which would bisect the West Bank and cut it off from East Jerusalem, received final planning approval. I'll click that hyperlink in a second. Thursday's signing ceremony was largely symbolic, but it allowed authorities to move forward with construction. The civil administration of the defense ministry approved the plans, which would see 3,412 housing units built in a new neighborhood of Ma'ale Adumim on the western side of the city, just east of East Jerusalem. Total investment in the project, which will include adding roads and upgrading major infrastructure, is estimated at nearly $1 billion cost. And I guarantee you a lot of that money is probably coming from America. Like, we're probably paying for a lot of that. It says advocates of a two-state solution have argued for decades that the E1 project would, in effect, divide the West Bank in two for its Palestinian population, sever Palestinian East Jerusalem from the West Bank, and severely harm the future viability of a Palestinian state, something celebrated by the government's ministers. Israel has long had ambitions to build on the roughly 12 square kilometer tract of land known as E1, but the plan had been stalled for years in the face of international opposition. Speaking at Thursday's ceremony, Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich averred that Israel will soon celebrate the annexation of the West Bank. Quote, the prime minister told me, I'm staying here to hear what you have to say, and I know what you intend to say, said Smotrich. This is at like a public, this is at this public ceremony. Here you see in this picture here, said Smotrich, quote, Prime Minister, all of us soon will thank you and congratulate and celebrate together the application of sovereignty throughout Judea and Samaria, end quote. He added, using the biblical name for the West Bank. A number of right-wing ministers have called in recent weeks for the annexation of parts or all of the West Bank as a response to several Western governments, including the UK and France, announcing that they intend to recognize the state of Palestine at the United Nations later this month, and that has already happened. Israeli NGO Peace Now, which monitors settlement activity in the West Bank, said last week that infrastructure work in E1 could begin within a few months and a housing construction within about a year. It said the E1 plan was, quote, deadly for the future of Israel and for any chance of achieving a peaceful two-state solution, end quote. The West Bank is around 3 million Palestinians, as well as about 500,000 Israeli settlers. And I think there's an E1 map that we have. So here's an earlier article that was hyperlinked in that one from August 20th. So from last month, Smotrich rejoices as settlement plan that, quote, erases two-state delusion gets final green light. Minister Feet's historic approval of controversial construction scheme in West Bank's E1 area, upending a decades-long freeze. Palestinian Authority says move divides West Bank into prisons. And it goes on to explain the major construction that we kind of went through in the other one. The crux of the E1 settlement project is that it builds a large development east of Jerusalem and basically cuts off Jerusalem from the rest of the West Bank. And Jerusalem is, of course, like the crown jewel in the minds of both the Palestinian and Israeli governments. Jerusalem is like the prize, right? Like that's the crown jewel. Both of them have, at this point, control over East and West Jerusalem. So East Jerusalem belongs to the Palestinians. West Jerusalem belongs to the Israelis. And basically what this would do is this would make Jerusalem, even though there would still be technical territory in East Jerusalem that belongs to Palestine, it would be physically cut off from Palestine, from the West Bank. And I think I have a map, E1 settlement map. I think I have that here. Yeah, here it is. Okay, so you can see, just to give you some context, this light blue is West Jerusalem. Here's East Jerusalem. Okay. The pink areas already belong to Israel. So these pink areas, even though they're technically part of Palestine, you can see this light blue area is the legal boundary line for Israel. That West Jerusalem is Israel. East Jerusalem, all the areas where you see the light pink and the dark pink, that's technically Palestine. However, it all belongs to Israel because these Israeli settlers have gone in there and at gunpoint have taken the land away, told people, hey, if you don't get out, if you're still in your house at 5 o'clock this afternoon when we come back, we're going to either arrest you or we're going to shoot you. And so they leave their homes, right? And then if they resist, they're branded terrorists. And then, of course, they're reported on the news as terrorists in Jerusalem fighting the IDF. I mean, could you imagine this stuff happening in America? Could you imagine, like, you know, a party coming into power, like we saw with the Biden administration, and them coming to your home and saying, this home belongs to us. If you are still here at 5 o'clock this afternoon, we're gonna kill you. I mean, what do you think Americans would do in the face of that? I'm pretty sure a lot of Americans would pick up arms and fight the government. And but if you do, you're then of course a terrorist, right? So you can see this very dark pink is the E1 development block. And so you can see how, because when you combine it with what's already built and as far as Israeli settlements, you can see how it pretty much is taking Jerusalem away from, like, what's left of Jerusalem away from Palestine. And again, it's a symbolic gesture. And then there's also, I believe, as part of this thing that Netanyahu signed on September 11th, I'm pretty sure it was either the E1 signing or there was another thing that he signed that said they're going to annex 85% of the West Bank, like on top of this E1 settlement. And so again, I'm teeing all this up, and it's a little serendipitous that I played the Barak Ravid thing because it was just a good length for how long I thought I was going to be gone, and I thought it was relevant. It ends up being even more relevant because now I want to play this clip. So this clip I'm going to play, a lot of you've heard it before, but let's just listen to it again. This is from that actual interview from this December of 2021. This is Barak Ravid interviewing Donald Trump. And Barak Ravid, remember, he was Unit 8200 of the IDF. I don't think he likes Netanyahu. I mean, the way he reports is somewhat objective, but he's made it pretty clear in his reporting he doesn't like he thinks Netanyahu is bad for Israel. So again, as I said on the debrief earlier, there are Israelis and Jews who recognize that this is all bad and this is not like moral and this shouldn't be done. I've had people like Gart, both Jews and Israeli Jews, come to Gart and say all this to my face, like they do not agree with any of this stuff. So I think we have to push away the identity politics that are being forced upon us by both the left and the right, and just understand that this is about a moral question of, do you recognize moral natural law of what is right and wrong? And if you do, then you will, I think, land on the right side of history here. And if you don't, well, I think you're going to land on the wrong side of history. And there's Christians landing on the wrong side. There's obviously Jews landing on the wrong side. There's Muslims landing on the wrong side. There's people landing on the wrong side of this because they're getting caught up in the identity politics of it all. But let's listen to this, and then we'll listen to the newest clip. This one is from December 2021.
What did you think when Bibi started talking about annexing parts of the West Bank?
I got angry and I stopped it because that was really going too far. That was going way too far. You know, when he did the big let's take everything and just start building on it. And we were not happy about that.
I heard that in your first meeting, you told him, what's the problem if you'll stop building for a while, for a year, for 2 years, stop building in the settlements?
Yeah,
and he wasn't very happy with that.
And I said, why are you doing this? Bibi did not want to make a deal. Even most recently, when we came up with the maps and the this and the that, oh, this is good, everything was always great, but he did not want to make a deal. Now, I don't know if he didn't want to make it for political reasons or for other reasons. I wish he would have said he didn't want to make a deal instead of, because a lot of people devoted a lot of work, but I don't think Bibi would have ever made a deal. That's my opinion. I think the general wanted to make a deal.
Okay, so one of the main reasons that I've pushed, like the thesis that I've pushed for a couple of years now, is because of like the stuff that Trump says in this specific interview, because there's other clips I could play. We're not going to play them all right now because they're not relevant to the exact story that we're talking about. But it's because Trump reveals to you in these interviews only played in Israel. Like you saw the graphics on the television. These interviews were ripped from a broadcast on Israeli Channel 12. So the Israeli people saw these interviews. The American people have not seen these interviews unless they're going out and looking for them on the internet. And they're very hard to find. Trust me, it was hard for me to find those clips. They become more prevalent recently, but 2 years ago, it was very hard to find those clips. This is why, though, I think what I think about Trump and Netanyahu is because he makes it very clear. He's like, like he knows Netanyahu's a bad guy. He knows Netanyahu is not actually who he presents himself to be. He knows Netanyahu's full of shit. He knows Netanyahu doesn't want a two-state solution. He knows Netanyahu doesn't want to make a deal. He doesn't want to do the Abraham Accords. He doesn't want to do any of that stuff. But if Trump were to come out and say all of that, is anybody going to believe him? Netanyahu's been lying for years, been like, we're the ones seeking peace. We're the ones seeking two-state solution. He said that after October 7th. I remember people on Badlands were promoting that. They were saying, oh yeah, well, Bibi's the good guy. Like he wants a two-state solution. He's the one who really wants peace. No, he's not. And now Netanyahu, as you saw in the speech this morning, he said, yeah, we don't want, like, there will be no Palestinian state. There is no Palestinian state. And by the way, that's not just a Bibi Netanyahu position. That is 90% of Israelis think that. I don't know if that's actually true, but 90% of the Knesset certainly voted that way. Elections are all fake and gay, so who knows? But 90% of the Knesset voted that way, 90+%. So now that takes us to this. And the people who were promoting that on Badlands, by the way, are no longer on Badlands. But I just want to make that clear. And that's not the reason they're not on Badlands. But I'm just saying that there were people on Badlands who were like, oh yeah, Netanyahu's the good guy. He was, he wants the two-state solution. No, he doesn't. It's like, you got to go look at what he actually does and what he actually says and his history of statements and behavior, etc. All right, let's listen to President Trump here.
But did you promise leaders this week that you would not allow Israel to annex the West Bank? Is that something that you?
I will not allow Israel to annex the West Bank. No, I will not allow it. It's not going to happen.
Did you speak with Netanyahu about this?
Yeah, but I'm not going to allow it. Whether I spoke to him or not, I did. But I'm not allowing Israel to annex the West Bank. There's been enough. It's time to stop now. Okay. Yes.
But did you promise leaders this week?
I mean, you can, if you really are reading in on Trump, and I like to read his body language whenever he's in moments like this, because I think his body language just says so much about him. On Tuesday, we went through his speech at the UN. We don't need to go back and revisit it, but he was so pissed when he was making the jokes about the escalator and the projector thing, whatever it's called, not working. He was so pissed because in his mind, it's like, you're disrespecting the president of the United States on U.S. soil at a complex in New York City, his city, the city he's from. And it's not just about disrespecting Donald Trump. You are disrespecting the president of the United States, which means you're disrespecting the American people on the world's largest stage at the UN General Assembly meeting, which is the largest stage there is in terms of geopolitics. That's the highest stage there is. Regardless of what you think about the UN, that's a fact. That's where all the world leaders are coming together, and they're all there, and the whole world is watching, and you disrespect the president of the United States. You could tell by the way he was speaking and the look in his eyes, he was pissed. Okay. And then right here, like when they ask him about that, you can tell he's pissed when he's answering this, because how much flack has President Trump taken on behalf of Bibi Netanyahu? How much political turmoil has he suffered? How many people have abandoned him, like supporters? You've seen it online, because they think he is an Israeli puppet, because they think he's in Bibi Netanyahu's back pocket. Something, by the way, that Bibi Netanyahu says all the time. All the time he says that. He talks about how not necessarily Trump, but just American politicians in general bow to Israel. That's like what Netanyahu says. He's been caught saying it so many times, in private conversation, that American politicians bend the knee to Israel. And they ask, well, have you spoken to Netanyahu? It doesn't matter if I've spoken. Yeah, I've spoken to him, but that doesn't even matter. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Okay. So let's talk about why it's not going to happen and how are you going to stop him? Because it's very clear these people are like, Netanyahu is not stopping. He made that very clear today when he went to go speak. And the stage, by the way, is totally set at this point for for Netanyahu to come to the, remember, at the end of all this, Netanyahu's coming to the White House on Monday. Like, that's going to be appointment television. And yeah, you can bet your last dollar I'm going to be hosting that and airing that. All right, let's pull up the next story, because this, I'm trying to go in order here. It's not necessarily chronological, but it is like telling the story from the way I see it. Okay. So this story's from yesterday, but it's referencing a meeting that happened, I believe, on Tuesday or Wednesday. It says Trump's private promise. I actually think I want to go to that story, but I'm going to do this one anyway. Trump presents. Wait, what? That's not the right one. It's this one. Trump's private promise to Arab leaders revealed. Donald Trump privately assured Arab leaders at the UN that he would not permit Israel to annex the occupied West Bank, according to reports. This reassurance came amidst calls from several Israeli ministers for the annexation of the territory in response to increasing global recognition of the Palestinian state. During a closed-door meeting with 8 Arab and Muslim leaders, Trump's team presented a white paper detailing a peace plan for the Middle East, which included the commitment against annexation. The meeting, described as successful by Trump and fruitful by Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, involved leaders from countries including Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. And so the actual list was, from memory, was Turkey, Egypt, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Pakistan, Indonesia, and I think Jordan. Yeah, I think those are the 8. And a lot, as we went through, I think we talked about that at the end of the show on Tuesday. If we didn't talk about it on Tuesday, we talked about it on Breaking History on Wednesday. All this stuff kind of blends together for me. But that story is a very, very big deal because of the different parties that are at the table. It's not just the Arabs. You know, the Arabs, remember, the Arabs are the people who live in North Africa, like the North African coast, you know, Libya, Tunisia, Egypt, but also the Arabian Peninsula. So Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Oman, Yemen, UAE, Qatar, Kuwait. Those are the Arabs. Okay. The Turks are a Central Asian ethnicity that migrated to the Anatolia, which is modern day Turkey, in the 1200s. They actually went to Turkmenistan, which is north of Afghanistan, but one tribe went further and settled right in the middle of Anatolia. And after the Fourth Crusades, which was Christian on Christian violence at Constantinople, the Byzantines were weakened enough that this tribe could rise up and overthrow them and take control of Constantinople, now known as Istanbul. And that tribe, of course, was the Ottomans, and then they became the Ottoman Empire. That's a different ethnicity from the Arabs. Okay, and then you have the Kurds, of course, like they're mixed in there. You have the Persians, who are the Iranians. They weren't at the meeting, but you know the Turks are different from the Arabs. My point. Turkey and Egypt have been enemies for at least a decade now, 10, 15 years. Qatar and Saudi have been enemies. I mean, these are places that did not get along until the past couple of years. And now all of a sudden they're all on the same team, Sovereign Alliance. And they're all coming to Trump with hat in hand and saying, look, man, we have put up with this bullshit for way too long. And the world is sick of it. We're sick of it. We still don't really know what was said in the meeting. Like everyone's been pretty tight-lipped about it, which is a good sign. But my expectation of what was said is that they probably said, look, if this thing goes forward, if this E1 thing actually happens, we're going to intervene militarily. We, meaning not just the Arabs, the Turks, It wasn't Jordan, by the way. It was Pakistan. That was the extra country. So it was Egypt, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, Indonesia, Pakistan, right? Jordan. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But the Pakistan was there too, and Pakistan is a nuclear power. They have nuclear weapons. Okay, they have a legit military. Turkey has the second. Not only does Turkey have the second largest military in NATO, they have the largest military in the Middle East in terms of just numbers, like numbers of soldiers. So they have the largest military in the Middle East. Now, Iran's military is probably more powerful than Turkey in terms of like the weaponry that they have because of their alliances with Russia and China. But because we don't trust the Turks enough to like give them the things that they need to actually be like a legit military. But they have the largest fighting force. So you're talking about the largest military in the Middle East, the second largest military in NATO, meaning like Europe. So the US is 1, Turkey's 2. That's how big the Turkish military is. Backed by the Pakistanis, backed by the Saudis, backed by the Egyptians, backed by the Qataris. I mean, money, you're talking about lots and lots of money. They have a war chest. They have the money to fund this stuff. They can fund a war. Like, you want to go to war? Like, yeah. The IDF's been fighting a war for 2 years. They've never had to fight a war that lasted longer than a month. The Israeli economy is in shambles right now. How are you going to fight a war of attrition against the Muslims who haven't fired a shot yet? They've kept the powder dry until now. And then that's before the Russians and the Chinese come in and back them up, and the Iranians. So if you get just the Turks and the Pakistanis against the IDF, that's going to be a real problem. Then you talk about the Iranians coming in, then you talk about the Russians coming in, then you talk about the Chinese coming in. I mean, this thing could get out of control very quickly. But the good sign is that as of right now, these people are being very, very measured, and they're being very reasonable. Matt Ehret, when I started breaking history with him 2 years ago, actually, I think we started working together in October 2023. And I told him my whole thesis on MBS, my whole thesis on like the sovereign alliance, like what we call the sovereign alliance now. That's Burning Bright's name for it. But the idea that the Muslims were turning a page, like they were turning a corner, and the Arabs were no longer the Arabs of yesteryear. He was like, yeah, that sounds great and all, but just studying this stuff for as long as I've studied it, historically the Arabs are very impulsive. Like they respond too quickly to provocation. And I think that they're going to be provoked into a conflict with Israel, and that's going to get out of control. That has not happened yet. The Arabs have held their swords and have not escalated the situation. And Matt has told me, he's like, I'm extremely impressed that this young crown prince has been able to keep not only the Arabs, but the entire Muslim world in check, which is exactly what I thought was going to happen after October 7th, that he was going to tell everyone to sit down and shut up and not do anything. But now we're reaching a point where something has to be done because the annexation of the West Bank is being considered. So that that explains why Trump made that statement, because my guess is that he also explained all of this to, like, he probably promised all those guys, this isn't going to happen, guys. This isn't going to happen. Like, I'm not going to let the West Bank get annexed. Don't worry. He knows that that's the end of the Abraham Accords. It's the end of peace in the Middle East. It's the end really of so many other, the domino effect of this is ultimately global. It's ultimately a worldwide fallout, because it's not just something that would affect the Middle East. It's something where countries around the world would go to war over this. And then of course you have like the Jewish diaspora, which is a very powerful diaspora, and the influence that they wield over different countries, including America. There would just be a lot of strife and a lot of destabilizing, I think, fallout from all that. So we don't want that war to happen. That's what I think Trump is trying to contain right now. And what I'm trying to get to is, so France 24 is reporting this, and we don't know if this is real or not, but it says Trump presents 21-point plan to end Gaza war to Arab and Muslim leaders. U.S. President Donald Trump, while meeting with Arab and Muslim leaders on Tuesday, announced a 21-point plan to end the war in Gaza. His envoy said Wednesday, several nations this week recognized the state of Palestine as world leaders met for the UN General Assembly. Trump presented a plan to end the Gaza war in a meeting with Arab and Muslim leaders this week, his envoy said Wednesday, as Gaza's Civil Defense Agency reported dozens killed in Israeli attacks. U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff, who has been involved in months of mediation efforts seeking an end to the nearly 2-year war, said Trump had detailed a, quote, 21-point plan for peace in the Mideast and Gaza, end quote, in Tuesday's meeting with a group of leaders from Arab and Muslim nations. Quote, we're hopeful, and I might say even confident, that in the coming days we'll be able to announce some sort of breakthrough, end quote, Witkoff told a summit on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. The plan, quote, addresses Israeli concerns as well as the concerns of all the neighbors in the region. He said, without elaborating on the 21 points, a joint statement from the governments represented in Tuesday's meeting said the leaders had, quote, reiterated their commitment to cooperate with President Trump and stressed the importance of his leadership to end the war. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said later that Israel was not bound by a wave of recognitions of the state of Palestine, including by Australia, Britain, Canada, and France. Quote, the shameful capitulation of some leaders to Palestinian terror does not obligate Israel in any way. There will be no Palestinian state, end quote, he said. Remember, this story is from 2 days ago. This is before his speech this morning, which was even more provocative, I would say. Israel presses Gaza City assault, and then it goes on to explain how they're pressing forward with their assault on Gaza City and pretty much just killing people left and right. And this is like, this story right here is kind of ironic. This is from today, so I wonder if this says this was posted at 8:57. Maybe the timing here is off. Must not be my time because I think he spoke at 9 o'clock. But it says it was modified at 16:35. Netanyahu rebukes West over Palestinian state, says Israel won't commit national suicide. It's ironic. Amid jeers in a walkout by UN delegates, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Friday rebuked Western leaders for recognizing a Palestinian state in a defiant speech at the UN General Assembly. Netanyahu said Israel must finish the job against Hamas in Gaza, aggressively challenging allegations that his country is committing genocide in the Palestinian territory. Quote, Israel will not allow you to shove a terrorist state down our throats, end quote, Netanyahu said. Quote, we will not commit national suicide because you don't have the guts to face down the hostile media and anti-Semitic mobs demanding Israel's blood, end quote, he said. It's ironic because the media, for the most part, runs cover for Israel. And even the left-wing media, which claims to be anti-Israel, is still running the stories that Netanyahu wants them to run. They're not... If CNN and MSNBC actually wanted to subvert Bibi Netanyahu's grip on the evangelical right, it would come out and explain to everybody the difference between the Palestinian Authority and Hamas, which it has not done. You haven't seen anybody on CNN come out and explain there's two different governments here at play and they hate each other and they've been fighting each other since 2006. And basically one, like the earnest peace-seeking government of the Palestinian Authority has demanded that that Hamas surrender to them before Israel annexes Gaza. And then, of course, Hamas flips them the bird and says, no, like we will fight to the last man, which means we will give this land to Israel, which is why I think Hamas was created in the first place. Yeah, and so it goes on to talk about the protest, the circuitous route. We have not forgotten you. Netanyahu talking about the hostages, even though they have avowed no effort to actually get those hostages back. And then that brings us to, let's pull up the Badlands news brief, Badlands Substack. Because that takes us to what happened yesterday with Trump in the White House. So this is where the WrestleMania kayfabe comes in. Like people get frustrated sometimes. Like what's with the kayfabe? What's with the kayfabe? The kayfabe is not for our benefit. The kayfabe is not to quote unquote wake up the normies. I've never really thought that. I mean, at least not for a long time. The kayfabe is to mask Trump's intent with the other world leaders that he's playing chess against right now. All right. So when Trump says, for example, in this meeting he had yesterday with Recep Erdogan, he urges Erdogan to stop buying Russian oil as they meet in the White House. He makes a lot of comments to Erdogan that are pro-NATO, anti-Russia, reminding everyone, hey, I'm meeting with Erdogan, not because Erdogan is anti-Netanyahu, which he is, and Turkey represents the greatest military threat in the Middle East against Israel outside of Iran. I'm meeting with Erdogan because he is the second largest army in NATO. And, NATO is supposed to be fighting Russia right now. Like that's what he's reminding everyone at the very beginning of the meeting. He's reminding everyone that. Okay. So in this article, it says in earlier Oval Office remarks, Trump told Erdogan he would like Turkey to stop buying Russian oil and was very disappointed with Vladimir Putin, of course. From defense to energy deals, Erdogan is seeking to ink agreements with Trump worth tens of billions of US dollars, writes our reporter in Istanbul. Top on Erdogan's shopping list are F-35 fighter jets and more than 200 commercial planes. The two leaders are also expected to discuss the situation in the Middle East, including the war in Gaza. Days before Erdogan's visit, Ankara, which is the capital of Turkey, announced it had terminated retaliatory tariffs imposed in 2018 and on U.S. imports in a sign of warming bilateral ties. So this is an interesting article right here. Trump describes Erdogan's first White House visit in 6 years as great. Meeting with President Trump at a time when the international community is grappling with how to end the war in Gaza and Russia's war in Ukraine, which in my opinion are the same thing. They're both the same war, just two different theaters. The two leaders had plenty to speak about. The atmosphere was markedly less tense than Erdogan's previous visit in 2019, which followed a significant political fallout between the two countries over the situation in Syria, now a topic on which the two leaders are more aligned. Again, there's the kayfabe. So today, the U.S. president dominated the conversation with the press, telling reporters the pair will be talking on tariffs, a Ukraine ceasefire, and that Erdogan may be successful with regards to the sale of F-35 and F-16 jets. After a short stint with reporters, Trump and Erdogan left for their private meeting, which was later described by Trump with a thumbs up. Great, he said, of the 2 hours the pair spent together. 2 hours. That's much longer than he spends with most leaders. Most of them only get an hour. And you can read more about the Turkish president from chief international correspondent. Yeah, whatever. Okay, we're going to continue here in a second, but first, let's get a word from our sponsors. Geopolitics with Ghost.
Hello, Badlanders! It's your friendly neighborhood Jordan here, and I've talked to so many of you guys at the GARTs who've wanted help with supplementation, diet, exercise programming, and more. So I'm excited to announce the launch of my Applied Awareness private coaching group. In this group, I condense 15 years of holistic health experience into training just for you, with one-on-one support from me by way of weekly Zoom calls, daily video updates, a community chat where we can all ask and answer questions from each other, plus a lot of video courses, 8 courses in there with over 70 videos at this point. And if you like the whiteboard education, there's plenty of that in there. So if you're looking to move better, feel better, lose weight or gain weight, and strengthen your mind and your body, this is for you. This weekend, I'm launching a 6-week self-development program. So check the description down below to learn more and find how to sign up. I hope to see you in there.
Science proves that a healthy immune system is the body's first defense against the smallest of ailments to the most catastrophic. Coriolus versicolor is the most sought-after, all-natural supplement for both humans and pets to help boost the immune system. There are over 400 studies worldwide on its effectiveness in humans, including Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, MD Anderson Cancer Center, and now from the University of Pennsylvania School of Veterinary Medicine. Together, we can help reverse this terrible tide now plaguing your loved ones and give them the immune-boosting supplements that they need.
Deodorant should do more than cover you up. It should protect you all day long.
Dude, the deodorant stick is legit. I like the mint one. And, you go work out and you kind of get like, you get funky if you work out. Dude, like at the end of my workout, like I'm sweating, shirt got all those sweat. Like I'm like, dude, I still smell good. Like I absolutely love it. If you guys haven't tried it, try it.
That's the difference with Soft Disclosure. No aluminum, no chemicals, just clean, natural ingredients that fight odor and keep you fresh through every workout, every meeting, every moment.
I've always struggled with the you can't use aluminum deodorant because you're going to die if you use it kind of thing, because all of the non-aluminum deodorant products suck pretty much. Yeah. This is different. This is all day. You're all day good, and you're not putting any of that disgusting chemicals right near your lymph nodes.
Soft Disclosure deodorant, real protection, real freshness, built on truth. Available in mint and lemon grapefruit. Visit softdisclosure.com and use promo code Badlands for 15% off. Soft Disclosure.
All right, welcome back to hour 2 of Geopolitics of Ghost. I'm your host, Gordon McCormick. Today is September 26, 2025. Okay, so we were talking before the break, we were talking about the meeting that Trump had with Erdogan. And I want to get into some of the details of that. I want to get into the some things that I've come across myself doing digging over the past couple of days and just learning more about the things that I was talking about on Tuesday. Okay, so the big thing that initially came out was this nuclear deal. So that's the first thing that came out. So I want to start there, and then we'll talk about the other things, which I think are very important. And I'm just trying to make sure I have, here it is. From Turkey today, Turkey signs, not sharing it. Turkey signs a nuclear deal with U.S. during Trump-Erdogan meeting. You know what? I think I can put the comments. Can I do this? There we go. Now I can show the comments. Now when y'all comment, it's showing up on screen. I'm going to start doing that. So just don't say any, well, you can say whatever you want, honestly, but just don't get too crazy in there. Okay. Sorry. Back to this. Turkey signs nuclear deal with the U.S. during Trump-Erdogan visit. Dude, I think this is I think there's some devolution proofs in here. I need to send this to John. I'm going to try to be concise. Maybe I can clip it and send it to John so he can get the TLDR because he doesn't have the attention span to listen to me rant for 2 hours. Turkey signed a strategic nuclear deal with the U.S. during President Erdogan's visit to the White House on September 25th. Turkish Energy Minister Alparslan Bayraktar wrote on X, we have started a new process that will further deepen the deep-rooted and multidimensional partnership between Turkey and the U.S. in the field of nuclear energy, with the U.S. Secretary of State, Mr. Marco Rubio, in the presence of the leaders. After the meeting, we signed the Memorandum of Understanding on Strategic Civil Nuclear Cooperation. The agreement followed another large-scale energy deal concluded by Turkey during the U.S. visit, under which state-run BOTAS signed contracts for a combined 75.8 billion cubic meters of LNG imports with Swiss-based Mercuria and Australia's Woodside Energy. Okay, so the two big energy announcements are the fact that we signed a nuclear deal with Turkey, and the fact that we signed this LNG, which is liquid natural gas deal with Turkey. And that's interesting because, remember, you have the BTC pipeline. That's the pipeline that runs from Azerbaijan through Georgia and into Turkey. Okay, it's where the IDF gets all their oil from, their oil and natural gas from this pipeline. And BOTAS is the same organization that runs that deal, that runs that pipeline. Although they don't, I think they manage the pipeline, but as I understand it, they don't own the substance flowing through the pipeline, if that makes sense. They've been very clear about that. So people have been complaining that why don't you turn off the pipeline? And they said, legally, the material flowing through the pipeline does not belong to us. We have no control over who's buying it, who's selling it. We just provide the infrastructure basically to move it. But that's their like explanation to the detractors, arguing that they are fueling the IDF. But it sounds like the company actually selling it to them could be like Azerbaijani. I'm not sure about that though. So yeah, this deal is worth up to $43 billion through 2045. But it's interesting that they're importing LNG. Like they're going to be importing LNG to Turkey, and it's coming from a Swiss-based energy firm, Mercuria. We need to look into Mercuria and know more about them. Let's see. It's an agreement in New York. So yeah, we're not going to look into Mercuria right now, but I am adding them to my mind map. Just looking at let's just look real quick at their Wikipedia. A Cyprus domiciled Swiss multinational commodity trading company active in a wide spectrum of global energy markets, including crude oil and refined petroleum products, natural gas, including LNG, liquid natural gas, power, biodiesel, base metals, and agricultural products. Okay, so this is interesting because sorry about that. Has something in my throat. Because Cyprus plays into this somehow. I'm still trying to wrap my head around where Cyprus comes into all this. Cyprus is kind of a sketchy place. It's kind of like Qatar. There's a lot about Cyprus that is very mysterious. Igor Kolomoisky is Cypriot. There are a lot of people with dual citizenship or tri-citizenship who are Cyprus citizens. It's definitely a place where, as I understand it, people launder money through Cyprus, through their banking system, kind of like the Bahamas, kind of like the Cayman Islands, kind of like Switzerland. So the history of this company, as the company expanded, has hired traders and investment professionals from Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, the Lewis Dreyfus Group, and Electrabel. Well, that's not very encouraging. But it says in 2020, Mercuria earned $286 million with revenues in line with commodity prices to about $85 billion. The company's gross profit on sales for the year was $1.86 billion. In 2022, the company experienced record profits due to volatility in the aftermath of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In 2021, Mercuria bought the clean energy specialist from Beyond 6 from HC2 Holdings. In November 22, it was announced Beyond 6 was being acquired by Chevron. Okay. I was just seeing what so subsidiaries. Minerva Bunkering. I've heard of them before. Okay. So I need to dig more into this company. I'm not going to waste y'all's time by doing it now. But there's something that needs to be, there's some threads that need to be pulled on here. But going back to this story, yeah, $43 billion in deals. Now, a lot of people online were saying like, oh, this is kind of a silly thing for Erdogan to be like, this is what a letdown this is. Well, hold on. Number one, we haven't heard everything from this deal. Trump came out and said that there were going to be more announcements. He said both countries are going to put out statements. The other thing that is important, Turkey's nuclear ambitions. This is the section from the same article that I was just reading from. It says the latest understanding with the U.S. builds on Turkey's broader strategy to expand its nuclear capacity as part of its efforts to diversify energy supply, reduce reliance on imported natural gas, and meet growing electricity demands. The country's first nuclear power project, the Akuya, if I'm saying that right, nuclear power plant in southern Mersian province, is being built by Russia's state-owned Rosatom. The $20 billion facility, consisting of 4 reactors with a total capacity of 4,800 megawatts, is expected to begin operations in stages, with the first unit scheduled to be operational by 2026. So what, 6 months from now? Something like that. What is interesting about that is Rosatom, if that name sounds familiar, it should, to the audience of this show. That's the same company that's building nuclear reactors in Kazakhstan. We talked about that on Tuesday. They're building nuclear reactors in Burkina Faso, in Mali, in I think Niger might be getting one as well. Those are the 3 Sahel states that are breaking away and getting their sovereignty in Northwest Africa. They are building projects in a number of other countries. I believe Iran, I want to say they're building a nuclear reactor in Iran. And they also are the company that has been implicated back in 2017. Remember, we did the dig on Italy. Matteo, remember Matteo, the deputy prime minister under, what's her name? Our girl, Giorgia Meloni. Matteo, remember, launched his campaign to become prime minister in 2017. Running a campaign that was literally a copy paste of Donald Trump's 2016 campaign, the same like branding, the same graphics, the same everything, same rhetoric, all of it. It was a populist movement. And he didn't ultimately, while they won a bunch of seats, he didn't ultimately become prime minister because he was basically his reputation was destroyed in the media. They went after him. They accused his political party of being funded indirectly by Rosatom, this exact company. And they said he's a Putin plant. He's Putin. Putin is trying to take over Italian politics. And do you remember who the intermediary was between Rosatom and Matteo's political party? Matteo, remember, now is deputy prime minister. It was Banca Intesa. Banca Intesa is that bank in northern Italy. I think it's the largest bank in Italy now. Remember, Matt Ehret's friend, Alex Craner came on from Zero Hedge, came on Breaking History months ago and talked and gave a theory looking at this purely from the financial market world, because he comes from the world of like analyzing oil markets and financial markets. He's not looking at things like from the same starting point that like Burning Bright and I are looking at things. However, he's arrived at the same conclusions about the Sovereign Alliance, and he said that he thinks Banca Intesa and the family behind it are like deeply involved in all this. And that was 6 months ago, 5 months ago, he was saying that to us on Breaking History. And again, Rosatom and Banca Intesa working together in Italy. So, this is all signal. All this to me is the same. Now, the part that is like the devolution proof to me is, before I get there, I guess I'll just go ahead and show that this is a promises made, promises kept for Erdogan. Because Erdogan in 2023, when he ran for re-election, he promised to make Turkey an independent energy state. This is from May 4th, 2023. And he says, it says Erdogan from Politico, Erdogan plays energy card in Turkish elections. He's promising to get nuclear gas, nuclear power, which they didn't have at that point. And he said, and they want to develop their oil and natural gas resources, like in country. Same thing that we're trying to do here in America. Okay. And remember, there's been multiple color revolutions launched against this guy. He survived a assassination attempt last year, and according to our friend Nick No, who is the intelligence analyst who blew the whistle on Extortion 17, he said that it was Putin who saved Erdogan from the assassination attempt. That was a fascinating story. Now, let's go to the F-16, F-35 thing. Remember, we talked about the F-16 and F-35 situation on Tuesday. I'm not seeing anything yet come out. Nothing's come out yet about this. However, Trump has come out and said this. Let's play this little clip. This was during his like little Q&A after his signing of, executive orders yesterday afternoon. Where are we at? The algorithm on X is so screwed up because it never wants to let you do the thing. It never wants to let you find the thing that you're looking for. Here it is. So this is from Times of Israel. Trump says he will make a major announcement concerning Syria later today. This is yesterday. He said this 24 hours ago during his meeting with Erdogan. He actually said this. It was yesterday morning. He said this. And here's the video.
Well, I think President Erdogan is the one responsible for.
Oh, excuse me. I'm getting ahead of myself. No, that's not the clip. But he did say I'm going to have a major announcement on Syria later today. And that was reported by the Times of Israel. It says, quote, I took sanctions off in order to let them breathe because those sanctions were very strong. But I think we should have a major announcement today, Trump says in response to a question on Syria from a reporter at the White House. So he's reminding everyone that he took the sanctions off. He reiterates later in the statement that in that little moment that he did so at the request from two different people, King Salman, which is MBS's father, and MBS, of course, and Erdogan. Those are the two parties that asked him to take the sanctions off. Not Netanyahu, not the deep state, not the EU, not the Europeans, but the Saudis and the Turks were the two parties who told him to remove the sanctions from Syria, right? But this major announcement apparently is not about the sanctions, not about anything like that. He's already done that. So we still haven't heard anything. I've checked. Nothing's come out from the White House unless it's been done in the past hour and a half. I haven't seen anything out from the White House that about Syria. However, we do have this. I can share this little interesting two stories about the F-16s and the F-35s. Number one, the F-16 deal is already done. Chris Paul talks about like a lot of the deployments that we're hearing right now are things that were negotiated 5 years ago at the end of Trump's first term. We're just now learning about them, but these deals were done a long time ago. Burning Bryce says the same thing. I tend to agree with a lot of that thinking for the most part. Like the deals were already in place. Here is February 29th, 2024 from Reuters. Turkey receives U.S. draft letters approving F-16 jets deal official. The United States has sent Turkey a draft letters of offer and acceptance regarding its request to buy Block 70 F-16 fighter jets and modernization kits. Turkey's defense minister spokesperson said on Thursday, Turkey made the request in October 2021, 2 years after the United States kicked Turkey out of the fifth generation F-35 fighter jet program over its procurement of a Russian missile defense system. And I'll talk about that story next. But it said the U.S. administration finally agreed to conclude the delayed deal after a series of negotiations following Ankara's Ankara's approval of Sweden's NATO membership bid. U.S. President Joe Biden's administration formally informed the Congress of its intention to proceed with the $23 billion sale of the Lockheed Martin jets in January. So, again, there's a lot of things that are happening here that are being revealed to us now in real time, looking back on this in hindsight. Number one, there was a moment, remember, after the invasion of Ukraine by Putin, where NATO started puffing out its chest and being like, we're going to fight Russia. And then Erdogan came out, and he was the deciding vote in whether or not Sweden was going to join NATO. And ultimately he said, yes, Sweden can join NATO. And everyone was like, what the hell, dude? Like, you're supposed to be joining the SCO. You're supposed to be joining the BRICS. Like, you've been attending the BRICS meetings. You've been attending the SCO meetings. I thought you were boys with Putin. I thought you were boys with Xi. Why are you stabbing us in the back by letting Sweden join NATO? Like, now that's another border that Russia's going to share with NATO. Well, now we know that the reason that they did that was because the Biden administration was basically twisting their arm and saying, if you want these F-16s that you've been negotiating with us for years on, we're going to hold these contracts until you approve Sweden's NATO membership. Okay, Sweden can join NATO. Sweet. You can get your F-16s now. Hold up, though. This is a year and a half ago, or more than a year and a half ago. This is February 2024. The deal gets delayed. Here's November 2024. So this is less than a year ago. Turkey scales down the $23 billion F-16 jet deal, the U.S. minister says. Turkey has reduced its plan to buy $23 billion worth of acquisitions of an F-16 fighter jet package from the United States, scrapping the purchase of 79 modernization kits for its existing fleet. Defense Minister Yaskar Guler said late on Thursday, or on Tuesday, rather. NATO member Turkey earlier this year secured a deal to procure 40 F-16 fighter jets and 79 modernization kits for its existing F-16s from the United States after a long delayed process. Quote, an initial payment has been made for the procurement of F-16 Block 70. A payment of $1.4 billion has been made. With this, we will buy 40 F-16 Block 70 Viper jets, and we were going to buy 79 modernization kits. Guler told a parliamentary meeting, we gave up this 79. Hold on, let's pull up the archived version. This is a very interesting revelation in light of everything else that I'm reading about this situation, and I'll explain why. We gave up on the 79. This is why we gave up. Our Turkish aerospace industries facilities are capable of carrying out this modernization on their own, so we deferred to them. The sale of the new 40 Lockheed Martin F-16 jets and ammunition for them will cost Turkey some $7 billion, Guler added. Turkey placed its order in October 2021, 2 years after the U.S. kicked the country out of the fifth-generation F-35 fighter jet program over its procurement of a Russian missile defense system. Turkey wants to rejoin the F-35 program and buy 40 new F-35 jets, Guler also said. Turkey is one of the largest operators of F-16s, with its fleet made up of more than 200 older Block 30, 40, and 50 models. Ankara is also interested in buying Eurofighter Typhoon fighter jets built by a consortium of German, Britain, Italy, and Spain. Okay, so they back off of the 79 modernization kits because they have a bunch of old F-16s that aren't good enough to take on fifth generation fighters, the F-35. They're going to buy the 40 new Block 70 Viper jets, the F-16s. Viper, as I understand it, is like the name that the pilots all gave to the plane because the plane reminds them of like a snake striking. Even though the original plane is called a Fighting Falcon, and I think we talked about that. The Avivor Raptor. It's the bird that eats other birds in mid-flight. And that's why the plane is designed to be in combat dogfights. I really want to have General Quast on to talk about F-16s. I'm like super fascinated by this. I need to be autistic about this a little more, but I won't do that right now. But maybe I'll reach out to General Quast because I'd love to just pick his brain about fighter jets, and I don't have enough expertise on it to talk about it. But just logically thinking about this, so they figured out how to modernize the F-16s without these modernization kits. Fine. They're going to save $16 billion by doing that. But they are going to buy the 40. They haven't been delivered yet, it sounds like. And it sounds like this whole like F-16 deal with Trump is the delivery of those 40 jets, right? If they're new, they needed to be built. I don't know what the turnaround time is on them, but I can't imagine it's less than a year or so. Those 40 jets, along with the modernization of the existing fleet, the 200 they already have, that probably can be a good deterrence for the IDF in Syria. Because I think on Tuesday we talked about the fact that Jelani is like publicly talking about how the IDF's F-35s are dominating Syrian airspace and trying to establish, air superiority there. Excuse me. So I'm expecting to hear something about these F-16s soon. And to Chris Paul's point, maybe they've already been delivered. We don't really quite know. And then here's another story on this from a week ago where it says Turkey will buy aircraft from the U.S., Boeing and F-16 and F-35s on the shopping list. Now, again, this reporter from September 20th of this year, they may not realize that the F-16 deal has already happened. Maybe this is additional F-16s. Who knows? But see, it says right here, according to Turkish officials familiar with the matter, the Turkish president will seek deals ranging from defense to energy worth tens of billions of dollars. Turkey plans to buy 40 F-35 jets and 40 F-16 Vipers with the ammunition. They've already bought the 40 F-16 Vipers. I just read you that. I read you that article from a year and a half ago. They already got the letters from Congress saying that it's legit and that the deal is done, right? And then they basically went back and said, yeah, we don't want the modernization kits anymore, but we'll take the fighters. So this could just be, now that could be 40 additional fighters, but I'm thinking this might be the same deal. And this author just may not realize that, this deal's already been done. Remember, as it mentions down here, Trump's best friend, Tom Barak, is described as Trump's like oldest and closest friend, the guy he trusts the most outside of his family, because he's been Trump's guy since like the 80s, and he's always stuck by Trump. And Trump talks about how important loyalty is. It says the F-35 affair, Turkey was an original partner in Lockheed's F-35 stealth fighter program, but was excluded from participation after purchasing Russia's advanced S-40 missile defense system. This purchase resulted in congressional sanctions known as CATSA, targeting the domestic defense industry. Turkey recognizes that Trump may seek concessions to allow the purchase of F-35 jets. Turkish officials said Ankara could agree to establish a military technical mechanism to supervise the S-40 defense system in a controlled manner, although it remains opposed to abandoning it completely, the officials said. U.S. officials have repeatedly stated that any resolution on the F-35 depends on Turkey renouncing the Russian system. In June, the U.S. ambassador to Turkey, Tom Barak, told the Turkish state news agency Anadolu that a resolution of the F-35 dispute was possible by the end of the year. Now, again, what's also interesting about this is, let's see, I want to go to that website. What's interesting about this is that Andola is like is Turkey's like state-run website, and I'm just trying to actually pull it up. Here it is, aa.com.tr. I'm just trying to see if there's anything that's been announced since then. So Turkey, U.S. $100 billion trade deal. So they did announce a $100 billion trade deal. So a little more than what, so they're announcing like a little more. But this story is really interesting because this is related to all this. This goes back to Trump's first term. This is from October 12th, 2018. So we're going back 6 years. or I'm sorry, 7 years. Pastor freed in U.S. Turkey row that snared F-35 program. Remember, they're now blaming the purchase of a Russian missile defense system, the S-400 defense system, as the reason that Turkey was kicked out of the F-35 program, right? And remember, Tom Barak, who is now the ambassador to Turkey, is also more recently been appointed as the special envoy to Syria, because we don't have a diplomatic mission in Syria. We don't have an ambassador in Syria because of the civil war. So he is the ambassador to Turkey and the special envoy to Syria. And he's Lebanese. He comes from Lebanon. This story right here says a Turkish-American diplomatic dispute that entangled the F-35 fighter craft program appears at least one step closer to resolution with Turkey's release of American pastor Andrew Craig Brunson on Friday. A Turkish court convicted Brunson, who has been held since 2016 on terrorism charges he denied. But the court has now released him from house arrest and allowed him to leave Turkey. The case had become a cause célèbre among Christian evangelicals and a vocal priority for U.S. President Donald Trump and Vice President Mike Pence, as well as a source of friction between two NATO allies. Still, tensions remain high over Turkey's decision to deploy the Russian-made S-400 air and missile defense system, its refusal to follow U.S. sanctions on Iran, and U.S. support for Kurdish militants fighting the Islamic State, among other issues. This is like Trump fighting the neocons, I think, in the Republican Party, doing this. But like it cites Ben Sasse. You remember Ben Sasse? Ben Sasse was a total rhino. I don't think he's in Congress anymore. I might be mistaken on that. But he says, quote, grateful that Pastor Brunson's unjust detainment is coming to an end. But Brunson is just one of many Americans, U.S. State Department employees, and Western nationals that Erdogan continues to hold hostage. There is still work to be done, and President Erdogan has a long way to go before acting like a NATO ally we expect him to be, Sasse said. And then Lindsey Graham says, quote, I'm pleased. I'm not going to celebrate until he gets home. I want to thank the Trump administration, President Trump, and Vice President Pence. The United States has depended on Turkey's Incirlik air base to conduct its air campaign against the Islamic State in Syria. That's an important factoid right there. The U.S. has depended on Turkey's air base to conduct air campaign operations in Syria. So if the IDF is causing problems in Syria now, who are we going to depend on to go in there and stop them or deter them? Turkey, right? Here's where it gets really interesting, though. It says lawmakers have made the Lockheed Martin-made F-35 a bargaining chip in the complex relationship between two allies. The annual defense policy and appropriations bill signed into law in recent weeks included language to delay sales of the fighter aircraft to Turkey over Brunson's detainment and its plans to buy the S-400 system. So it wasn't really the S-400 system that stopped it. It was Brunson, his detainment, that stopped all this, right? And then later, after he's released by Erdogan, they're like, okay, thanks for releasing him, but we're still not going to give you the F-35s because of the S-400 system deployment, which, again, this might just be kayfabe. All of this could just be WrestleMania nonsense to delay something that is going to come through at like the most opportune moment, right? Here's the interesting part. Turkish pilots and maintainers, meaning like maintenance crew, arrived in July at the F-35 International Partner Training Program in Arizona, but the first two jets themselves will remain in U.S. custody for at least the next year, the Pentagon has said. Washington is concerned that if Turkey obtains custody, it could lead to Russia gaining sensitive technical information about the aircraft through sensors in the S-400 system. Okay? That's the reason they don't want to give them the F-35, is because they don't want Russia to get the information. This is the neocons being worried about this. They don't want Russia to get the technical information about the F-35, which they can then use, in Ukraine against F-35s, right? However, this part right here is the part that interests me. Turkish pilots and maintenance crew arrived in July. So this is 2018, July 2018. Turkish pilots and maintenance crew are training in Arizona on the F-35. Okay, so they have all the information, the technical know-how. They know how to fly the F-35. They know how to maintain the F-35. As soon as they get an F-35 in their hands, which maybe they already have one, we don't know, they're good to go. They can start launching. They can start running missions immediately as soon as they get an F-35 in Turkey. That's really interesting to me. And then, of course, the other concurrent story about the 40 F-16s being purchased last year, but just never being delivered. And now, like, media being like, well, they're negotiating this F-16 deal. No, they're not. They might be negotiating the delivery of them because they probably have been getting built for the past year and a half. Let me just ask ChatGPT real quick. It says there's no clear confirmation on the F-35 deal. Trump hosts Turkey's Erdogan as the U.S. considers lifting a ban on the F-35 sale. And then I want to ask it about find the most recent story about the F-16 deal between Turkey and Trump. Trump, not the U.S. I want to know about Trump's deal with the F-16. Yeah, so it says in talks at the White House, Trump and Erdogan had talked about the desire to buy F-16s. And then this, yeah, and then it points me back to this article. So it's going back to the article we already read through, the one where it scales it down, and then it's citing the AP article, and then it's citing this article from 2 days ago. It says Turkey plans to buy hundreds of Boeing airliners and Lockheed Martin fighter jets. Bloomberg News reports. Well, Bloomberg, you didn't do your homework because they already bought the Lockheed Martin jets. It's the Boeing jets that they probably are looking to buy, like they're looking to actually negotiate on. So we don't have any confirmation yet on any of this stuff. But this is all fascinating to me. All of this is like, man, we got to keep our eye on Syria. We got to keep our eye. I want to know what this big announcement that Trump's going to make on Syria. And I want to know what oh, look at this. Here we go. Israel-Syria talks said to hit snag over Israeli demand for a humanitarian corridor to Druze. Officials said Syria had rejected a request for a corridor to the Druze city Sweda, saying it would retaliate. Actually, I saw the graphic for this earlier. I reposted the graphic with the joke. So I'll pull the graphic up. Renewed demand derails plan to announce deal this week. Efforts to reach a security pact between Syria and Israel have hit a last-minute snag over Israel's demand that it be allowed to open a humanitarian corridor. Here we go. To Syria's southern province of Sweda. 4 sources familiar with the talks said Syria and Israel have come close in recent weeks to talks, to agreeing on the broader outlines of a pact after months of U.S. brokered talks in Baku, which is Azerbaijan, Paris, and London that accelerated the lead up to the United Nations General Assembly in New York this week. The pact was intended to create a demilitarized zone that would include the province of Sweda, where I don't know if I'm saying that right, where sectarian violence in July killed hundreds of people from the Druze, an offshoot of Islam. Israel, which has a 120,000 strong Druze minority whose men serve in the Israeli military, has said it will protect the sect and carried out military strikes in Syria under the banner of defending it. In earlier talks in Paris, Israel asked to open a land corridor to Sweda for aid, but Syria rejected the request as breach of its sovereignty. I remember this. And let's see where Sweda is again. Sueda, I think that's how you say it, is here. Is right here. So at the very southern portion of Syria. But this is an area that I'm pretty sure the IDF has already been in this part of Syria for a while now. I think it's just a matter of trying to codify their presence there into like something that is somewhat legal. I don't think they're asking for permission to go there. I think they're already there, and I've been covering this for months, or reading about it for months at least on the news brief. They're justifying their presence there by saying we're defending the Druze. That's why we're not going to leave the Druze people here vulnerable. We love the Druze so much. It's like, yeah, sure you do. And then here is the map that I was looking at, that I made the joke about. And that, of course, is this map. And the joke that I made is, because there's a lot of just psyops all over the place in the pro-Israel Hasbara crowd. If you know what Hasbara is, you should go look it up. Israeli propaganda, Zionist propaganda. This guy, Eyal Yacobi, has been promoting a lot of the Hasbara content, and this is what they're proposing, according to this guy. Says he says Israel is currently repelling jihadists from mass slaughtering the Druze and Christian minorities in Syria. If it weren't for Israel, tens of thousands of Christians and Druze will be murdered. You won't see a single media outlet report this. Yeah, let's ignore the fact that Assad has always been the defender of Christians in Syria, and it was ISIS who overthrew Assad, who were trying to kill all the Christians there. And the joke that I made, of course, is that I always found it funny. The Druze flag is the combination of the Israeli flag and the LGBTQ flag. Like, you got the white and the blue, which are the identical. It's the same colored blue from the Israel flag. And then you got the yellow, the red, and the green. It just looks like an LGBTQ flag, right? You need a little bit of purple in there, and it would be a perfect rainbow. Interesting. But again, I think the reason they want this autonomous zone codified, and look how much more aggressive that map is. That's all the way up to Damascus than this map is from months ago. The other one I was just showing you was the one from months ago, and that was well, it doesn't really matter. I don't need to pull it back up. Yeah, this is the one from the Times of Israel, and the one, like, they're talking about what happened in that map. Well, yeah, the map that they were showing here is like a fraction of what the map is that they're actually showing. That guy's putting out. And the other thing is, where is it? Yeah, here's a picture of Assad. There's the Druze leader, right? Friends with Assad. Yeah. They're really looking out for the Druze. That's why they took out Assad, is because they're looking out for the Druze, even though Assad was already looking out for them. And this is a really, really strange thing from Mike Huckabee. We'll kind of wrap it up here, and then I'll do rants. It is worth God, this Nick Freitas thing really, really got me triggered. But maybe I'll talk about that on Daily with Brian, since it's election related. I wanted to see if I could find the Yair Netanyahu has been getting promoted. I don't know if you know this, but his 33-year-old son, Netanyahu's 33-year-old son, lives in Miami. He's like an aspiring like podcaster, like influencer. He's like speaking at CPAC in Hungary last summer. I think this past summer he spoke there. He's been putting out just a lot of ridiculous statements, and I wanted to see if I could find one of them. It was he said, he's like, where are all the conspiracy theories on Qatar and Saudi Arabia and the UAE? And I responded back and said, I have a lot of conspiracy theories about them. They just all involve them being, in alliance with one another and being the good guys. Anyway, let's look at this Mike Huckabee video, because this is pretty ridiculous. This has been making the rounds like on Fox News and stuff. They're like, oh, Mike Huckabee's so right about all this. Yeah, okay.
Most resilient I've ever seen on earth. It may sound a little bit this afternoon as if this is a nation that is the most resilient I've ever seen on earth. It may sound a little bit this afternoon as if I'm almost speaking on behalf of Israel rather than the U.S., but I want to explain that part of my advocacy in our relationship is because if you came to my house tonight for dinner, and you came in and you said, oh, Mike, we like you. We really think the world of you. We just enjoy being with you. so excited to be here with you and have dinner with you. But your wife, we can't stand her. We don't like her a bit. I hope she's not going to be at the table. I would say, well, she will be. You won't be. Get out. Because if you were to insult my partner, you have insulted me. This is a nation that is the most resilient.
He describes our relationship with Israel as a those aren't my posts. As a husband and wife relationship. Well, Mike, let me ask you this. What if you found out your wife was running around town murdering people like late in the middle of the night, or you found out that your wife was like running around town sleeping with everybody? Like, what would you have to say about that? Because that's kind of how I would describe Israel's relationship with us. If they are our wife, then they have not been a very faithful wife, and they have not been a very good wife to us. Now, Watcher Guru is reporting that I reposted this yesterday, that Microsoft has terminated its Israeli military access after its technology access to its technology after uncovering mass civilian surveillance systems. Let's see if ChatGPT can verify that, because that would be a really good example for Mike Huckabee of how they have not been a very faithful wife. Let me just see if I can find that article. And sometimes when you like go to look for this stuff, it just doesn't pop up, and like the algorithm ignores it. This is from The Guardian. Okay. Wow. This look, I mean, The Guardian's not that The Guardian, you know, oh God, the news is reporting it. It must be real. I don't know if it's real, but mainstream media is reporting on it. So it's not just some internet rumor, or maybe it is. Who knows? It says Microsoft blocks Israel's use of technology and mass surveillance of Palestinians. The tech firm ends military units access to AI and data services after Guardian reveals secret spy project. Microsoft has terminated the Israeli military's access to technology it used to operate a powerful surveillance system that collected millions of Palestinian civilian phone calls made each day in Gaza and the West Bank. Microsoft told Israeli officials late last week that Unit 8200, the military's elite spy agency, had violated the company's term of service by storing the vast trove of surveillance data in its Azure cloud platform, sources familiar with the situation said. The decision to cut off Unit 82's ability to use some of its technology results directly from an investigation published by The Guardian last month. In a joint investigation with the Israeli-Palestinian publication Plus 972 magazine and the Hebrew language outlet Local Call, The Guardian revealed how Microsoft and Unit 8200 had worked together on a plan to move large volumes of sensitive intelligence material into Azure. Well, that's interesting when you consider that what happened this morning, where Netanyahu during his speech said, right now, as I'm speaking, my speech is being live broadcast to every cell phone in Gaza through like Mossad, like Israeli intelligence has hacked everybody's cell phone and they're all hearing me right now. So hear me now, surrender. Right. I mean, yeah, dude, like that. What's to stop them from doing that to American cell phones if they feel like they need to communicate directly with the American people and go around President Trump, right? You can kind of see why President Trump has adopted this, like, keep your friends close, but your enemies closer situation with Netanyahu. It's because by doing so, it's like Netanyahu, even though Netanyahu, I think, knows that Trump is not on his side, he really has no choice but to line up with him in public optics, because otherwise he's going to look like a jackass, and he already is starting to do that. So anyway, I think we're going to land it there. Guys, hit the thumbs up. I really appreciate all y'all being here. We've got a great crowd today. Happy Friday. I think I had actually some rants that I didn't read from last week. Let me just grab those. I saved them on my mind map. They came in maybe when we were playing the outro. One of them was T-Bone 316. Thank you very much. Second time I run into this program. I like what you're throwing down, and we'll be following now. Thank you, T-Bone. $10 rant, and I think that was in response to something. I didn't call him out, but I was just responding to something he said in the chat. T-Bone, welcome to the program, brother. Appreciate your support. Appreciate the follow. Share this with anyone you think might be interested in geopolitics. Ray Leia, $5. Ghost, any comments on the Feast of Trumpets live streaming today in 20 minutes? Thoughts on the geopolitical sphere? I can real quick say something about that. I haven't looked deeply into it, but the Feast of Trumpets, as I understand it, Ray Leia, has to do with Rosh Hashanah, which lasts like 2 or 3 days and happened this past week. And this year apparently was very different, because I did look into it after you said that to me. And what is different about this year is that I guess they blast trumpets every year at this ceremony. It's a call to stop work and remember the Lord. But this year, like here's some forward, like the Jewish Independent outlet. And it says, great news, the rapture is coming on Rosh Hashanah this year. Online, many Christians are preparing to be bodily assumed into heaven on the Jewish New Year. Okay, that sounds a little okay. A new date for the rapture has taken over the internet, declaring that true Christians will bodily ascend into heaven this week on Rosh Hashanah. Believers are sharing tips for the rapture. I mean, this is kind of crazy but it is what it is. What I wanted to get to, though, was what was happening at the Feast of Trumpets, because it says the idea of the rapture is tied to a line in 1 Thessalonians 4, which references trumpets or shofars, describing the dead in Christ rising first with the trumpet call of God, followed by those who are still living ascending to the clouds. Though the New Testament in Matthew 24:36 says that, quote, no man knows the day nor the hour of the rapture. Some posts on Christian TikTok are saying that this too is about Rosh Hashanah, since Jewish tradition requires 2 witnesses to the new moon to confirm the day, and no one knows when they might see it. Yeah, so they're like conflating Christianity with Judaism yet again. Oh, and here you go. Look at this. The idea of rapture is a relatively new one in Christianity, while various lines in the New Testament refer to some sort of second coming of Jesus, also a raising of the dead. The idea that a rapture would come to save true Christians from the 7 years of tribulations was only popularized by a British minister in the 1830s, John Nelson Darby. If you don't know that story, we talked about that on Breaking History. John Nelson Darby fell off of a horse, hit his head, had like a hallucination, and his hallucination was this. And then he basically started preaching the hallucination about the rapture and about like the end of days and all of that, and ties it to Zionism and like the Zionist movement. And then in the early 1900s, it says, this is going back to the article, it says, in the early 1900s, an American edition of the Bible called the Schofield Reference Bible further spread the idea of rapture through its margin notes. That's also, by the way, the Schofield Bible is also the thing that conflates the Jewish state of Israel in modern times with the house of Israel from the Bible. And my understanding of the house of Israel is the house of Israel are those who keep the covenant with God. And as I said last week, the covenant, Mount Moriah, like we played the clip last Friday of Mike Huckabee talking about Mount Moriah in that speech he gave. Mount Moriah was where Abraham took Isaac up, his son, to sacrifice him for God. And then God stopped him at the last minute and said, basically like that was a test. We now have a covenant between me and you. Keep the covenant and we'll be good. And part of the covenant was, accepting the Messiah when the Messiah presented himself, and that was Christ. And so when the Pharisees, the Jewish elite, rejected Christ, they broke the covenant of Abraham. And then the new covenant, the New Testament, the new covenant is when Christ said, believe in me. That's all you need. You don't need to do any of this other stuff that the rabbis are telling you to do. You don't need to do any of that. Okay. All you need to do is believe in me, and you will be, and that is the door to salvation. You will then be the house of Israel. You will then be children of God. The house of Israel are the followers of Christ. And the Schofield Bible says that the state of Israel is the house of Israel. That is where they get conflated. And that is where the evangelicals, I think, exploit that for political purposes. You get a lot of hate for saying that, but that's my interpretation of it, and may or may not be true. The Feast of Trumpets thing, though, just to finish that thought, apparently there were like hundreds of trumpets that were blown on like Tuesday. And it was the first time this had ever happened where they actually like came forth and did the feast. Let me see if I can just find it real quick. Feast of Trumpets, horns blown. Because I did go and look at it after you did that Rumble rant. And I'm trying to find the actual let me see if I can find on X. Of course, like the algorithms on the search engines aren't going to find it. Feast of Trumpets. Because I saw videos of it. I was like, whoa, this is, I guess, not normal. Here it is. Okay. So the Feast of Trumpets, so the article or the post says, the Feast of Trumpets is an example of what is foretold in the book of Revelation. One day this sound will be heard around the world, and all human beings on the planet will hear it and tremble. On the day the Lord takes his bride up and out of harm's way, we may hear the trumpet. Let me hear your thoughts. Here's like the trumpets being blown in Jerusalem. But I think that I don't know if that is from this year, because this year what they're saying happened is that, and I'll check the chat if y'all are screaming at me in the chat. Maybe you're screaming at me in the chat for the link, but my understanding is that this year there was just something different about it. They did like a bunch of, it was like hundreds of trumpets were blown that had never happened before. Anyway, I did look into it. It is interesting. I haven't like run it down all the way, but it all kind of ties into the Darbyism, John Nelson Darby, the Schofield Bible, the evangelical kind of takeover of the like reinterpretation of the Bible and the House of Israel. And then also what's happening with the Temple Institute, where they sacrifice those heifers in July. The establishment of Greater Israel, which is, Syria, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, and then the construction of the third temple, which all of these things have to happen according to revisionist Zionism, which I mentioned earlier in the show. All of those things have to happen in order for the Messiah under revisionist Zionism to arrive. So originally, I think in the Torah, it says the Messiah arrives and then these things occur, like the temple is rebuilt and all of that. But now revisionist Zionism, which was created in like the 1930s by Jabotinsky, says that no, we establish the state of Israel, we rebuild the temple, and then the Messiah comes. So all of this is like dispensationalist stuff, which is like the end of days, like the end of the world. And you just got to be careful with that stuff, because that stuff will be weaponized against people in the worst possible way, exploited. So anyway, I want to check for, look, we got a rant from someone. It was Annie RNC, $10. Thanks, Ghost. Great show. Please keep educating us. Annie, thank you for being here. I really appreciate your support. And we'll keep doing the show as long as we can. Badlandsmedia.tv/boost. If you're listening to this on replay, you can go there and do a boost. Eleanor, good to hear from you, Eleanor. And I'm going to read yours. I just want to make sure I'm not missing any others before we go. Yeah. Eleanor, 2000, $30 from today. Further support for your tremendous work, Gordon, and for keeping our brains on the edge of our seats. Thank you, Eleanor. I, again, appreciate all the support. You're always very generous with your boosts. And this is like, exciting is kind of a strange word to use, because there's a lot of things that are a little dark. But I am very encouraged by what I'm seeing. I see the invisible hands moving, and it looks like Sovereign Alliance pro Golden Age stuff is happening, while some really, really not so great things are being thrown in our face. But I think we just have to, pray for guidance and follow what the spirit and our soul tells us is right, and make the right choice, and not give in to the impulses of fear and the manipulations of the bad actors out there. So thanks again, guys. Please hit the thumbs up one last time and share this around. that helps me get up a leaderboard and get the show more widely disseminated. And we will see you on Tuesday. Oh, Monday evening, I'm going to have Colonel Oak, Lieutenant Colonel Oak McCullough is coming on the Book of Trump. We're going to talk about this manual that he gave me at GART, which you can't quite see. The FM1, for those who served in the military, you would be familiar with this warfighting manual. And man, there is a lot of rich material in here that we're going to talk about. I'm really excited about that conversation. So Monday night, the Book of Trump, Colonel Oak is coming back for a second appearance, and we will see you then. And then again on Tuesday for Badlands Daily and Geopolitics with Ghost. Y'all have a great weekend.
Thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up on this video. And a special thank you to all of our advertising partners. Please remember to shift your dollars to support those businesses that support Badlands Media.